June 1941, Hitler unleashed Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. Its target, Stalin's Soviet Union. It was the culmination of Hitler's thinking and theorizing about dealing with what he perceived to be his biggest enemy, Soviet communism. 3.8 million Axis soldiers would invade and fight in the 5-month operation to destroy the USSR. The Red Army, caught off guard by the timing of the German assault, its officer corps fatally weakened by political purges, reeled under the attacks. The German armies concentrated on 3 main objectives: Leningrad, Moscow, and Kiev. In the first 30 days, Field Marshal Ritter von Lieb's Army Group North drove to within 135 miles of Leningrad, while Hitler's Finnish allies also attacked towards the city. In the centre of the front, Field Marshal Fedor von Bock's Army Group Centre drove 480 miles forward. Many of the Soviet Union's most important cities fell to the Germans. On the 17th of July, von Bock captured Smolensk, the key to Moscow. At the same time, Army Group South, under Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, cut a swathe through the Ukraine. It appeared as though the Soviet Union was finished. Stalin had 800,000 men with which to defend the capital, but of the 83 divisions available, only some 25 were fully operational. The Germans launched Operation Typhoon, the assault on Moscow, on the 30th of September 1941. Army Group Centre had to overcome a series of elaborate defensive lines, centred on cities in the path to Moscow. The 2nd Panzer Group took Orignal, 75 miles south of the Soviet first main defensive line. 3 days later, the panzers captured Bryansk, while the German Second Army attacked from the south. The Soviet 3rd and 13th Armies were encircled. In the north, the 3rd and 4th Panzer Armies attacked Vyazma, trapping 4 Soviet armies. The Germans had cracked Moscow's first defensive line and captured over 663,000 prisoners, from a total of 3 million captured since the start of Barbarossa. Stalin had only about 90,000 men and 150 tanks left to defend Moscow itself. On the 13th of October, the 3rd Panzer Group was only 87 miles from Moscow. Martial law was declared in the city. But the weather was bad, with heavy rain and snow that turned the roads into mud. German tanks, with their narrow tracks, struggled to cope. On the 31st of October, a temporary halt to the advance was called, so that the Germans could reorganize their precarious supply situation. This gave the Soviets a breathing space. Stalin organized 11 new armies that included 30 divisions of tough Siberian troops better able to cope with such conditions. 1,000 tanks also arrived. As the temperature fell, the mud froze and the German advance resumed on the 15th of November. The German plan was to move the 3rd and 4th Panzer Armies across the Moscow-Volga Canal and envelop the city from the northeast. The 2nd Panzer Group would attack Tula, then close on Moscow from the south. These movements would cause the bulk of the Soviet armies to move to deal with these threats. As they did so, the German 4th Army would attack the centre. For 2 weeks, Short of fuel and ammunition, the German armies fought forward towards the city. In the south, the Soviets stopped the 2nd Panzer Group. On the 22nd of November, Siberian units counterattacked and defeated the 2nd Panzer, but the 4th Panzer Group managed to push the Soviets back and cross the Moscow-Volga Canal, the last major obstacle before the city itself. Units of the 7th Panzer Division were now 22 miles from Red Square and the Kremlin. But this group got no further forward on the 28th of November when a powerful Soviet counterattack pushed them back. Northwest of Moscow, the Germans reached Krasnaya Polyana, now Lubanya, just 18 miles from the Kremlin. But again, stiff Soviet resistance and German supply problems stopped them cold. However, the German 258th Infantry Division got closer. Part of the division's Panzer Pioneer Battalion appeared to have discovered a gap in the Soviet lines. On the 2nd of December 1941, a small number of light vehicles and motorcycle combinations reached the township of Khimki, close to the Moscow Ring Road. I accidentally visited Khimki some years ago when I missed a connecting flight at nearby Sheremetyevo Airport and spent a night in the town. And this is all that the Germans managed as well. Officers claim to have seen through binoculars the gleaming golden domes and spires of Red Square and the Kremlin from their position at Khimki. They were 14 miles from the Kremlin. But the story is either exaggerated or a case of mistaken identity. Moscow in 1941 was fairly low-rise, so the Kremlin's buildings certainly stood out on the skyline. But many high-rise Soviet apartment blocks had been built along the main highways out of the city centre. Also, Khimki in 1941 contained no tall buildings from which to get an elevated view of the far distance. Another problem with the story was the fact that the Soviets had camouflaged both Red Square and the Kremlin. The golden spires had been painted in dark colours, the Kremlin walls painted to look like buildings with windows. Camouflage and plywood structures had been erected on Red Square to confuse the street layout from the German Luftwaffe, and Lenin's mausoleum had been disguised as a 2-story residential building. In the snowy, cold conditions, the Germans probably saw snow and frost reflecting off the roofs in strong sunlight, or they saw other towers and church domes in the general direction of central Moscow. Whatever the truth, Khimki was as far as the Germans managed to get towards Moscow. The small number of German troops in the township waited for support that never came, and on the 3rd of December, a Soviet force of local militia, supported by a few T-34 tanks, managed to push them out of Khimki. If you want to see the spot today, the point of furthest German advance has been marked since 1966 by a memorial consisting of giant Czech tank traps at kilometer 23 on the Leningradskoye highway into Moscow, next to a giant IKEA furniture store. As severe winter weather descended and supply problems continued, the German offensive against Moscow stalled. On the 5th of December, the Soviets launched a massive counterattack. By the 7th of January 1942, when the Soviet offensive halted, the Germans had been pushed back between 60 and 150 miles from Moscow. The battle for Moscow was over. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share. Also visit my new audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. Details below. You can also help support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box.